place where real dialogue matters.
Make some noise for that sound, man.
It is time to take flight with Audio Airstrike.
What's up, everybody? I'm Everett Hall-McNeill, and this is Audio Airstrike, episode 142. First off, I want to thank you for joining us, those of you who are listening to us on iTunes, those of you who are listening to us on Soundcloud, and also those of you who are watching this via YouTube or any other video platform. We definitely appreciate you either way you're watching it, whether it's audio or visual as well. With that being said, I have a very special guest at this time, and I wanted you guys to take a moment at looking over some of the accomplishments of this gentleman with a very, very, very bright story and a very, very accomplished career. Colin C. Thompson, a Canadian-born Jamaican, is the founder and CEO of Oligai Enterprises, Shanghai, a business consulting company focused on coaching, training, and blockchain technologies. Specializing in personal development, diversity, and coaching, Colin coaches individuals and groups on how to reach their goals, dreams, and desires. In his downtime, he enjoys himself through competing in various events such as marathons and triathlons with his wife, Kay. One of his most known quotes is, "I am fortunate to be able to do on a daily basis, fulfill my true passion of building Oligai Enterprises to help individuals through life, coaching and business training and facilitation, while also being able to live my dream of working with the next great disruptive technology, blockchain." Ladies and gentlemen, with me at this time is Colin C. Thompson. Colin, thank you for joining us on Audio Airstrike. We appreciate it.
Hey, Everett, good morning and good evening to you. I know you're there in the U.S. where it's the evening time, and it's bright and early in the morning, and I think you can hear my son waking up in the background. He lives here. He likes to let people know that he's awake in the morning, but he'll be quiet in a few minutes. So, again, thanks for having me. I look very forward to getting to know your audience and whatnot today.
Yes, absolutely. So, I will say this, in terms of everybody that I've had a guest on the show, you are definitely the one that lives the furthest away. All the way from Shanghai.
Yeah. Well, I would be closer if the border wasn't shut down between the U.S. and China. But right now, a lot of us are stuck here.
Hey, I totally understand that, man. I totally understand that. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on. And, man, I want to kind of give you the floor, and I want you to kind of tell us your early life and some of the things that you struggled with early on when migrating to the U.S.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, okay, so let me tell a little backstory. I was born in Toronto, Ontario, in the 70s. My parents, my family from Jamaica. So my parents first migrated from Jamaica to the U.S. I think you know that Jamaica is a very beautiful country, very small island. However, its economy is built around tourism, and it's very hard to be on the forefront when you're trapped in that tourism loop. So my family, like a lot of diaspora from Jamaica, sought a better life. And typically you go either to England or you go to North America. My parents went to Canada with my older siblings. I have 3 older sisters and 2 older brothers. They all were born in Jamaica. I came out in Canada. In Canada, life was pretty basic. I was a little boy. I think my parents, if there was anything shady or tough there, my parents did a great job shielding me from it. So I didn't really feel anything from a difficulty. I think the only difficulty was probably reading and writing like every young kid. When I moved to the U.S., there was a drastic difference. My father was an engineer and had opportunities in the U.S., so he moved to the U.S. and brought us, of course, brought his family with him. But going to the U.S., there was a drastic difference. I think, as you may or may not know, Canada is a very diverse country. A lot of different races, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Canada doesn't have its own issues with discrimination or racism, but as a child, I didn't feel it. As a child, though, coming to the U.S., I almost instantly did feel something was different. I may not have known what it was, understood what it was, but it was more issues based on skin color. And I went from Toronto to Louisville, Kentucky. And Louisville, Kentucky is It's sort of in the South, but there was definitely a Southern mentality there where people of color and white people, Caucasian people, had different types of interactions. So my father sat me down and said, "There are certain neighborhoods you should not go to." Things were done, things were said in my neighborhood. We were one of two black families in my neighborhood, and we felt like it. Of course, the two black families gravitated toward each other, and luckily they had a little boy and a little girl, so we grew up with them. But there was definitely a difference between how our neighbors treated us and how they treated their fellow non-black neighbors.
I mean, that's got to be definitely a culture shock coming from Canada, which seems a little bit more inclusive at that time. And then coming down to the U.S., which, let's be honest, the racial tension is right up against your face the second you touch down from a plane to the second you step foot on American soil. And especially being down south at a time where, now, Southern culture is kind of Southern culture does have its issues still in the United States, but it has kind of relaxed since the time that you've been down there. But one of the things that I know for a fact was probably alarming to you, especially back at that time, was seeing that tension right up in front of your face at a young age.
Little things, for example, when we had birthday parties, we were not invited. And if you think about how a little boy feels when he sees his other neighborhood kids are having birthday parties with each other, and you're not invited, you feel a certain way. But I'll tell you what, you get used to it very, very quickly, and you just learn not to. As a kid, you forget things, right? You learn not to let that impact how you interact with the kids one on one.
That's pretty interesting. Because I know that was it. Here's the thing with that. I'm kind of amazed by how you being in the U.S. now, you being in the South, you seeing a little bit of the racial tension, and then having the wherewithal, even at that young age, to pivot and be like, okay, well, I can easily adapt to this and move forward. Now, there's other stories, and I've had other people on where that's kind of been a very, very hard adjustment because it's like, well, it shouldn't be like this. And because, you coming from, I feel like people that are born and raised in the U.S. That are of skin color, they have to sit their kids down at a very, very young age when, almost like 5 or 6 or 7 and be like, hey, I need to warn you about this, and this. It seems like that you got a hint of that and was like, okay, I see what the culture is like here. I'm just going to pivot. And that's what I think that you guys' approach was a little bit more quick and different, whereas other people that have been born and raised in the United States was kind of like, we need to have a sit down because this is very serious. There's nothing wrong with either or approach, but I just noticed. But what amazed me was just the construct of the two.
Yeah, Everett, you're spot on. And I'll tell you the background. If you talk to most people of color who were not born in the U.S., who immigrated to the U.S., they could be from the Caribbean, they could be from Africa, South America, even Mexico. One thing they'll say that, where we come from, we're struggling, we're hungry, we're trying to make things work. When they get to the U.S., they didn't have the generational slavery on the shoulder. They didn't have the PTSD from slavery. So when you're as you're growing up, you still believe you can do things because in your home country, you may not have those racial issues. In Jamaica, the issues weren't about race, right? They may be about other things. Same thing in Africa. They may be about other things. So when you get to the U.S., your view is, look, African Americans have been here for a long time. We see the image on TV. The image on TV, which is a false image, shows that they're not working hard. We are working hard. We fought to get to the country. So sons, daughters, work hard. If you work hard, you'll get rewarded. Don't get caught up in this thing that you're black and you want handouts and whatnot. Now, I've come to find out that that's just a story on TV. The systematic discrimination is real, right? So I had to learn that later. But again, we did not have that, what I call baggage on our shoulders from day one. So it was very, 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 very different mentality. My father always said, work hard, work hard, work hard, like he did, and to be able to have a good life for you and your family.
That's very interesting. So That's a good points right there. So now that we've gotten past some of the racial differences between the U.S. and where you grew up in Canada and then being born from Jamaica, I wanted to get into what were some of the steps that had you become passionate about being a life coach?
Okay, I missed your last question.
Oh, so I wanted to ask you a question because you said you migrated from, you were born from Jamaica, went into Canada, and you came over to the U.S. Were there any Americans get very uptight about immigration and the immigration process and stuff of that nature. What were some of the struggles that you faced, and why do Americans ignore? What have you learned from Americans? Why do they have such this mindset that immigration is like this bad thing? Because not everybody that migrates over here has ill intentions. They're just trying to put food on the table, some of them. So I wanted to kind of break down and also talk with somebody who has experienced that, who's kind of, saw firsthand what the parents have gone through that are trying to migrate over here. What are some of the things that you've seen from that aspect?
Let me say, Everett, first of all, I look at being an immigrant now as a badge of honor. I got to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. So that was around third grade. So by the time I was in high school, I'd forgotten, mainly, really because I grew up what I would call in the U.S. I adopted all the norms and whatnot. But I recall being 8 years old and moving over here, people told me I talked differently because I had more of a Canadian accent. I say about as opposed to about. But, growing up in Louisville, give me 3-4 years there, I sounded straight like people from Louisville talk. So a very, 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 very country or very, very Midwestern, you can say, accent. So by the time I got to university, I pretty much had, if you looked at me and talked to me, you would never think I wasn't from the U.S. It wasn't until I would say probably, 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, when there was a lot of talk about immigration. I said, wait a second. My parents are double immigrants. Immigrated to Canada first and immigrated here. So my friends are talking, having a conversation about immigrants. I remind them, look, guys, I'm an immigrant. Don't get it twisted, right? So I started wearing it as a badge. And luckily, most of my friends never had anything bad to say about immigration. They have more things to say about the policies that are being put in place toward immigration. So I can't speak on how people feel about immigrants because the people who I spend time with, they're more of a viewpoint, let people in. They don't feel like they're losing jobs to immigrants or anything like that. So I haven't really faced anybody who was really anti-immigration.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing because I think because I'm very welcoming towards people that want to come to this country. I feel like everybody deserves the opportunity as long as you ain't trying to hurt nobody or damage the livelihood of other people. I don't have a problem with somebody coming over here and making a living for themselves and accomplishing the dreams and goals that they have. Despite as to from a racial standpoint, what I think about this country, I do believe that there is still a lot of opportunity here and that anybody can turn around and make things happen. I've seen too many examples of that despite the different systematic things that have gone down. I do believe that there is still opportunity for those that, work smart and understand how to navigate within. So when it comes to, immigration and things like that, this is my thought process. Like, I don't have a problem with it. A lot of Americans, and this is just me kind of giving you the American perspective. I feel like a lot of Americans get their ego hurt when an outsider comes in, builds a business, goes successful at that business, regardless if it's small or multi or a multi-million-dollar corporation, and they get a little bit intimidated. I think that, some Americans look at it from the wrong viewpoint. Instead of being, hey, well, it's the land of opportunities. We had a guy who was a guy or girl who was an immigrant come in and make some of themselves. That should be inspiring. They interpret, some Americans interpret that as, he's a problem. He or she's a problem. I don't like it. He or she can just come over here and do this while I'm sitting over here struggling. And I feel like that's the wrong approach. Yeah. There's some Americans that feel that way, because instead of being inspired to do better or worse, or I should say better, go and ask that immigrant questions about, well, hey, like how, I know you came over here with a little bit to nothing, or you came over here with some resources to take those resources and grow it into this. Like, how did you get there? Instead of being intimidated and letting your ego get in the way and blocking your blessing potentially, and being like, well, how in the world did they get that opportunity? How dare them come over here? Sadly, from my perspective, I've heard people talk like that ignorantly,
you're telling the story of the U.S. now. Right, when one race of people saw another race of people coming up and said, "Hey, we got to stop that. We can't let this race come up." But I'll tell you something: you have to go back and look at the mentality of people who immigrate to other countries. Let's be honest here. Now, I spent a lot of time abroad, and wherever I go, people talk about the land of milk and honey. It's not Africa. It's not Egypt. It's the U.S. They always say, "Colin, if you work hard, you can own a house in the U.S." That's true. Maybe it's not a big house, but if you work hard, you can buy a house in the U.S., right? There's always something you can afford to buy. But if you look at it, people are immigrating to the U.S. because where they are, it's not working. They want something better. So that step from going from their home country to the U.S., a couple of things. That means that they've done things through education, through whatever, to be able to be in a position to go to the U.S. It also means that their family may be depending on them who are back in their home country. It also means that they are now a story, because they've made it out. So when they go to the U.S., they have a lot of things riding on their success, and they will take 2 jobs, they'll take 3 jobs, they'll go to night school, they will do everything they need to do to succeed. And a lot of times in the U.S., people work very, very hard. Don't get me wrong, but it's a different type of hunger. It's a different type of need. A lot of folks who immigrate, they're literally sending money back home. They're literally raising their family. They're literally away from their wife and kids, or spouses and kids, until they can bring them over. So it's a different sort of need. It's a different fire that's in the belly. And you're right. They do come over here and they do try to build business.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful thing, because. And it's part of me goes, I want them to win, and I hope they get everything they got, because anytime I see somebody that does not know what that person has been through and it starts coming off like a hater almost, it's like, okay, you just made me cheer for that person more. And I've seen a lot of, and I'm just telling you from my side as a American-born citizen, that it's, from an American standpoint, it's sad to see, because I'm like, why aren't we championing him? We always say this is a melting pot, but the second that somebody comes into the melting pot and gives a new ingredient that makes he or she become successful, you guys want to kick him out the very melting pot, and it doesn't make any sense. Or, they say outlandish stuff, unintelligent stuff, not knowing what that person has been through. So, in my personal opinion, I totally get where you're coming from, and actually, I totally sympathize with what you're coming from, because people do not know. People see the immigrant making multiple businesses and stuff like that. They don't know the amount of hard work, the trials and tribulations, getting permits for certain things, making sure all your paperwork is right, because, it's different, because, as an immigrant, when you're an immigrant, you got to make sure all your paperwork is, and regardless if you're an immigrant or natural born citizen, you got to make sure all your paperwork is secure. Whenever you're opening up a business.
Let me correct that, because one of the biggest concerns that immigrants, green card holders, people who are not U.S. citizens, whether they're born here or naturalized, the biggest fear is being deported. The biggest fear. So we talk about a lot of immigrants. We're very mindful of the laws. And now we're very mindful of when we leave the U.S., can we get back in? I spent 26 years in the U.S. I think it was. And I still get nervous when I go through immigration, when they let me back in the country. So the biggest fear that immigrants have now is being able to leave the country, go back home, and get back into the U.S. And one thing about citizens, no matter what, you can go to through the immigration with covered in blood. But if you're an American citizen, they must let you into the country. No question, not no questions, but they must let you in because you are a citizen. It's not true for permanent residents. It's not true for non-citizens. You have to always meet the criteria to come back in the country. And the criteria can change overnight. So a lot of times people won't travel back home to the family because they're nervous about getting back into the country. That's a big fear.
Yeah, I could definitely get why that could be a big problem. Because I mean, it's one of those. It's like it's probably the biggest catch-22 for an immigrant, and this is why I'm glad I got you here to speak on it because there's only so much that I know, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I brought you on because you can speak to the voice of an immigrant. I can't speak to that because I've been citizen born here. You know what I mean? And so there's only so much I can speak to, and I don't have as much knowledge on that aspect the way that you do and other people do. So I'm always open to asking these certain questions because I want to learn. I want to get the idea. I want to understand from your guys' perspective on what an immigrant may have to deal with or go through. I have citizen privilege of no matter what, if I have the credentials, they have to let me back in. That's not the case for everybody else, right. Especially somebody that's not citizen born. So I definitely appreciate you for shedding light on that.
Let me add, if you don't mind, let me add, it's true what they say though, right? Most immigrants love life in the U.S. because it is better in some cases. Well, I shouldn't say it's better, but they're able to live a better life. They're able to get a job. They're able to send money back home. So for most people who come here, they do, despite the noise, right? Because typically we don't think about getting deported, right? We think about earning a living. So for most people coming here does really change and improve their lives. So I got to say that the hype about the U.S. being the land of milk and honey place to be, it is true. It is true. There are a lot of opportunities here.
Oh, okay. I'm glad. I'm glad that is still a thing. I'm glad that it's still a thing because when I used to hear it, I'd be like, then I would turn around, look at the news, and I would see what'd be happening. I'd be like, they sure they calling us the land of milk and honey the way we act? But then
yeah. And something interesting, being here in China, and as you know, China has in the U.S. China makes up by far the vast majority of international students. What you're seeing now is you're seeing a lot of Chinese families going to Australia, going to Europe, going to Canada, and bypassing the U.S. And it's really hitting a lot of industries very, very hard. Forget tourism, right? The things taking place between the U.S. and China now are really impacting where Chinese want to go. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, the Chinese have money. They really spend, when they travel, they spend money. When their kids go to college, they're buying a house for their kid. They're buying a car for their kid. So right now, I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know that China is pivoting as far as where parents are sending their kids to school and where parents are immigrating. They're now going to more to Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and Canada. Not so much the U.S.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me because I'll be honest with you, I feel like from an educational standpoint, as an American, I think our educational system is on the decline. This is just me. I know I sound like I know you probably saying, "Dang, do you even like your country?" But the way I'm talking about it, but I'm just being real and pointing out some of the things that concern me as somebody who's from here. I feel like our educational system could be better. So when I hear that we are being beat educationally in certain areas, it doesn't surprise me. Because I feel like there's certain spots that we need to improve on. I wish we got back to, having more agriculture classes in high school and middle school. I feel like we need to know more about business and finance in middle school and high school, not waiting till college for that. I think we need, I would like a basic one-on-one about political science as early as high school. I think I would like to see some of these things implemented, because these are the things that are very essential. And let's not forget credit. I would like a class talking about credit within the classrooms currently in America as well. These are things that are not currently in the classrooms.
Right.
These things are, you don't learn about this stuff till you're doggone near almost out of school or a senior in college. You getting all at that point. I wish that we had, because I've heard that these classes are available out of the country for certain people that are in high school and even in middle school. So I wish some of that was implemented more here, because that would be way more beneficial from an economic and financial standpoint than, giving somebody giving them the Cloud9 dream just to be in financial debt for the next generation of whoever that family line is.
Yeah, but Everett, you're coming from a American centric view. And I'll tell you why. There's nothing for Chinese people, and I'm going to say probably for people in Asia, there's nothing better than a degree from a top U.S. college. Nothing better, right? It's not about what you learn. It's about that piece of paper. There's nothing better than that. And China is a very cash-driven country. So if I ask my friends about credit cards, they don't use credit cards. Most things, they save up money and they pay cash. So credit card debt is getting to be a problem here in China for the younger generation, but it hasn't always been an issue. So I agree with you that some education should take place. But if you have that degree from a U.S. college, and first of all, most Chinese are going to top colleges. If you have that degree, you are set. And again, it's not about what you learn, it's about that piece of paper. Well, that's their thought process. I disagree with that, but that's their thought process. It's about that degree.
Right, because some people do go by, well, what credentials do you have? What school did you go to? This and that.
Absolutely.
Because that's a good way to get into the door. For me and in my field, because I come from a video and film production background. Yeah, the degree gets you into the door of certain things, but at the end of the day, we need to see the skills.
Right.
So speaking of skills, I wanted to get into your passion as a life coach. Where did that start, and how did it ended up moving your career into Shanghai, China?
So my career, I got to China working for IBM a number of years ago in the supply chain field. My background is IT and supply chain, and I was fortunate enough to join IBM at a time when they were still allowing their young managers to get training internationally. So they brought me over to China in 2008. Now, let me back up a little bit. Growing up, sports has been a part of my life for, since I can remember. And luckily, when you have 5 older siblings, you're the one always getting beat up. You're the one always playing against the older ones. So you develop a skill set. So I was pretty fortunate to be pretty good at sports. And with that came the responsibility and leadership on teams to motivate team members. So from a very young age, I was always trying to motivate team members, motivate my team. And what I found was motivation can really change people's reference point, meaning somebody may not believe they can do things, motivate them, they can run through walls. So I've always been very big on motivation and inspiration. Always been very big on that. What I found, though, if I fast forward to my mid-20s, early 30s, what I found, though, is if I motivate somebody, and people will call me, say, Colin, I need some motivation, hook me up. I would motivate them, and then a few weeks ago, same phone call. Then a few weeks later, same phone call. I constantly have to motivate. Motivation does not last. It does not last. A lot of times when we want to improve our life and do things, it's not about motivation. It's about being consistent. So luckily, in probably five or 6 years ago, IBM asked me recruited me to do some internal coach training. And what I found, it was like a light bulb, like a light bulb went off. What I found was this thing called coaching. We didn't call it life coaching, we called it coaching. This thing called coaching means that I'm now going to work with individuals or teams for a set amount of time or until they reach a certain goal. So now they have an accountability partner. Now they have somebody who's helping them to reach their goals, improve their lives. And it was like, wow. So you're telling me that if I motivate and inspire somebody, I now have a new tool I can use called coaching that really helps them to reach their goal. Because the reason I want to motivate and inspire is because I want people to reach their goals, people to do things, get up, do things, have purpose. But it's coaching that allows me to do that. So I started coaching about 5 years ago. And it's been like, you talk about purpose. I got to say, it sounds corny. It sounds corny, but I can say I really found purpose because there's nothing like somebody calling you that you haven't talked to in about 2 years and saying, Colin, that conversation we had changed my life. Or your coaching changed my life. I mean, there are countless stories I can share of people who wanted to improve their lives. And one thing that I always say is their life has been improved, but so have the lives of their family and friends also. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's the reason why that's the ultimate. Awards are cool, getting a pat on the back is cool, but when somebody, taps you on the shoulder and said, man, like you changed without your influence, without your words, without you making an opportunity for me to thrive, like you changed my life, and I definitely appreciate that. Like that's the ultimate right there, because a lot of people, especially, and I'm gonna use my background and where I'm from. I don't want to speak on yours because that's your life, but a lot of people that I've seen that I've been around, there are some out there that have thrown in the towel too quick. From an outside perspective, I see the potential in them all day, but they just don't see it in themselves, and they throw in the towel too quick. And sometimes all it takes is that little bit of coaching, and sometimes the conversation can be hard to get through. But I think the sense of letting them know that, hey, I'm here to coach you through this, and I'll work with you through this. You just got to be open, and to sit back and look at the progression, to see the light bulb go off, and then they're prospering, and then they're going after it, and they have this gleam of hope. This is the purpose, I think, to the reason as to why you do what you do, because it's not only refreshing, it's not only a confirmation on this is the path that you've been called to do, but it also is a blessing to a lot of people in a very unique way. A lot of people, feel some type of way if they go to a therapist, right. but they'll feel just as good if they go to a life coach. So it's very, very important. I think a life coach is a happy medium between a motivational speaker and a therapist.
Yeah, you raise a very, very good point. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
A lot of people ask me, Colin, what is a life coach? And a lot of times what they're really saying or asking is, how is life coaching different from therapy? And as you mentioned, there is a stigma to going to a therapist. I think that if people who need a therapist and people who need coaching, it's not for the same issue. If you need a therapist, it's for something a little more deeper, maybe something from the past. With therapy, you try to understand the past to help you go forward. With coaching, we acknowledge the past, but everything we talk about is going forward. We help people to go forward, but we're not therapists. So I want to make it very, very clear. So people who need therapists go to a therapist. But coaching, as you mentioned, there's not much stigma, but coaching is still a fairly new profession in a lot of places. A lot of people don't really understand what a life coach does. Most of the time, they think a life coach will give you advice. Give me some advice, help me to do this, help me to do that. Give me advice, help me to improve my relationships. Give me advice, help me to develop stronger and better habits. And we don't give advice. We give zero advice. All the success comes from the client. Now, we'll do a good job of helping the client to transform themselves from where they are now to where they want to be. What's really more asking the client to look into themselves and help them find their own way. So it's very different from therapy. But I got to say that over the past 2 years, a lot more people have been talking about life coaching. I think Oprah Winfrey said about 4 years ago that she uses a life coach. And after that, a lot more people said, let me understand what this is. And for most people who take life coaching, their lives are improved.
Yeah, and I think that's the end all be all goal. Because when it comes to coaching, what's the way I can say this? Your parents, in a way, were like your early life coaches. And then you reach a point to your life where you're at a crossroads and the advice that your parents gave you isn't like it's there for foundation and it built you, but you're now in a point where it worked for that generation. You're in your generation now, and you're at a crossroads as you're trying to figure out what you do. And the advice that your parents gave you is somewhat dated because it worked for their generation. Now you have to figure out the pathway for you. And I think a lot of people get hung up right there. And so I feel like where you and a lot of other life coaches come in is they help you figure out where exactly you want to go in your future, suggest some resources, but also give the keys and the knowledge about the right path or the several paths you can take to get there in a very beneficial way life-wise. Did I hit that nail on the head to a point? Or was I a little bit off? You can tell me if I was a little bit off. It's a blunt show.
Yeah. I think you're using a screwdriver for a nail, right? because in reality, again, first of all, I think a parent is a mentor, a trainer, a coach, a teacher, all of those things.
Right.
When you talk about life coaching, you mentioned giving tips. Again, we don't give tips. We don't give suggestions. We ask the clients. For example, if a client says, I need to decide, I have 4 opportunities for a job. I need to decide which one I want to do. One could be, let's say one is selling wine. One is modeling. One is doing photography. And I'll say, okay, they'll say, Coach, which one should I do? And I'll say, which one do you think you should do? Right? We'll always put it back on the client. So the client is finding their own way. We do not, because if we offer advice, what if it's wrong? Right? What if it's wrong? Right. As you mentioned, with the parent thing, that may work for the parent, maybe not for the child. Same thing with clients, right? We did not offer advice because our advice is based off our past. And our past, the client's past is very different. But we ask very probing questions. What do you think you should do? What do you want to do? What's best for you? What do you want to avoid? And at some point, you get down to and they identify what they should do. And that's why coaching is so good. Everything is put back on the client, and they feel that. They don't feel like, for example, if you go to somebody for advice and they give advice and you take a certain path, you still feel like you didn't learn it yourself, you took advice. But if you find a path on your own, you now have the tools to use that same technique the next time you come into a major decision.
You know what? I like that approach. I know I almost came up this close to messing it up on my original take, but I do like, now that you explained it more deeply, I like that approach. I definitely like that approach more. So now that we understand your passion as to why you do life coaching and some of the methods that you've used to impact the lives of others, what made you move to Shanghai? What made you take that? Because I don't know culturally a lot about Shanghai. So I have 2 questions. One, what made you move to Shanghai? The second question is, how different culturally is it from the United States? Just so I have an idea.
Right. Can I add one more thing about getting into life coaching?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very interesting. I shared with you my aha moment, but we all have aha moments. The question is, are you bold enough? Do you believe in yourself enough to go for it? Are you bold enough to leave a job that pays you quite well to go out on your own into the wilderness, so to speak? And, I talk about having what I call unreasonable confidence. Anytime we want to do something that has the opportunity to transform our lives, we must have confidence, and we must be our biggest cheerleader. Because, for example, when you told folks to go and do a podcast, some said, yeah, great. Some may say a podcast. Nobody does podcast anymore, right? But you have to believe in yourself to the fullest. So I always tell people, you have to be your biggest cheerleader. Anytime you want to try something, don't worry about what anybody else says. You got to believe in yourself, and you must have what I call that tunnel vision, right? And always bet on yourself. So going into coaching, I had to really have that tunnel vision. Despite my background in IT, my background in other things, I had to say, you know what? I can learn this. I can do it. I can be very, very effective. And it's very important because, again, anytime you're making a decision to live a life by design, you have to be bold and take action. So that's the other part of why I got into coaching. And the best thing about this, which may sound strange, is I get paid to do this. I get paid to do it, right? And in life, think about this. You can get paid to do almost anything in life. You can get paid to shovel snow. You can get paid to sweep the streets. You can get paid to climb trees. Almost anything in life you can get paid to do. Actually, I saw a woman on YouTube who was getting paid by taking paper in her hand and crushing it in her hand. And she has millions of viewers. I said, wow, if you really can get paid to do anything, so why not get paid doing what you love and what you're good at? So I feel very fortunate to be able to make a living by doing what I love and what I'm good at.
Amen to that, man. Definitely amen to that.
I got your question about Shanghai.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So I came to Shenzhen, which is South China, in 2008 with IBM. They had a manufacturing site there, and it's interesting because growing up in the U.S., my father, double immigrant, always told us, be a citizen of the world. You've heard that phrase before, a citizen of the world. The world is big, it's small. See things, experience things, learn things. And I think because I felt that difference when I came to the U.S., I always knew that there was another reality out there as far as how people interact with each other. So I've always had a thirst to try a different environment. Luckily, again, I got one of the best ways to get abroad, if you can do it, either education, scholarships, or through a company who will then pay for your travel, pay for your living expenses and whatnot. Luckily, that was my scenario. I was hired into a managerial program. And I remember going to the airport, and my brother, we're going to BWI, and my brother said, "You're not coming back, are you?" I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm finally getting out. It was a 6-month project. I'm finally getting out. I can't think about getting back in yet. And my first day in my role at IBM, my manager said, "What's your goal for your time here?" Which is a very, very, good question. I said, my goal is in 5.5 months, I want you to offer me a full-time job here. And he did. So I stayed in Shenzhen, and Shenzhen is the manufacturing capital of the world. Any laptop you have, Foxconn, any Apple product you have is coming from that part of the country. They manufacture all of your devices. So I was there, and I had an opportunity to move to a different role within IBM to do more process work, to be a process specialist, how to be Lean Six Sigma, those sort of things. So I moved to Shanghai in, I think, 2012, and I've been here ever since. And Shanghai is a very, very culturally diverse city. 20 million people here from every country in the world. It is so rich with culture that it's hard to leave, because now I have friends who are French, friends who are Italian, friends who are African, friends who are from the Caribbean. I mean, I see more diversity here than I have in my entire life. So it's a very good environment here, and it's not what you see on TV when they talk about China.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because people, I feel like people only get one prism view based on what people show through social media and on television. But it's one thing to actually be down there, see the sights for yourself, and make connections that way. Now, with that being said, I know that you're still currently on lockdown as we are to a point.
No, sir. No, sir.
You're not?
There is no lockdown here at all.
No
Zero.
lockdown. Okay, cool. So let me ask you this. We had, of course, some states and some countries are still dealing with the pandemic to a certain point. What was your experience dealing with the pandemic, dealing with coronavirus, and how is it now? Let me start off with that.
Yeah. So when the virus really hit here in China, and China was the epicenter, it wasn't a pandemic yet. It was just really in China, in Wuhan, and slowly coming out of Wuhan as well. We were at the time, mid-January, we were actually on vacation for Chinese New Year in my wife's hometown. My wife's from Hong Kong area, so we were down south, close to Shenzhen, actually. When we heard about it, we instantly got on a plane to come back to Shanghai because we felt that if they shut the airports down, we want to make sure that we're at home. Now, one thing about the nature of the environment here in China, the government will make a mandate, and that mandate is followed in every tier coming down. So the government, think about an umbrella over the whole country. The government makes a mandate. They say, we advise you to stay home. Stay home, stay inside, lockdown. That comes down to the province level, to the city level, to the district level, to the sub-district level. So now what we call gardens or apartment complexes, everybody now is on lockdown. So it's not like in other countries where you have a choice. Well, you have a choice, but it's not like where people are going to say, you know what, I have a right to be outside, I'm going to go outside. No. It was a ghost town. Just about everybody stayed inside. Everybody wore a mask. It was scary to go outside and see how quiet it was. It felt like, it felt like the end of times, actually. Now, that's outside. Inside the house, my wife was very concerned because there was no news about this. Now in the U.S., there's a lot of news about the virus, but back then, not a lot of news. So the first, I would say, month and a half was very sketchy because all day, all we heard about was how many more people were infected, how many more people died. It wasn't until, I would say, the end of March, beginning of April, that we started relaxing a little bit. My wife and child didn't go outside for 6 weeks, literally not one step outside. I went outside to get food and things like that. So it was very scary, but luckily we were able to hunker down. We were able to still do a good job working and whatnot. And that helped us pass the time, continuing to work, continuing to coach. Now it's literally the only time we talk about COVID now is when we watch the news because we're living life as it was before, but because of the airport or the border issues, not a lot of foreigners are back here yet because they can't get into the country. So it's not as vibrant as it used to be, but it's still very, right now, this is where you want to be, quite frankly, because other parts of the world are still having issues. I think China had, 50 cases? It has 50 cases now. So it's very peaceful here when it comes to COVID.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Let me ask you this. Were there any reports coming from where you were at that you kind of looked at and went, okay, that's a little bit too sensationalized? Like, what's the truth to this? Did you come across any reports that were that way? Because I believe this is a real thing. Like, I'm not playing with this. Like, I understand COVID-19 is a real thing. Like, but there's some people that, how it is.
Yeah, the only thing that, from our perspective here, that we thought was a little sketchy, and typically in China, you're getting filtered news. Mm-hmm. Everything is filtered, so what you're watching is by design. The only thing we felt was sketchy was the number of cases, the number of deaths. You hear stories that it was much, much higher here than reported. That's the only thing sketchy. But I would say that the U.S. news did a good job is doing a good job on reporting what's taking place in the U.S. So I do get a lot of news there. It's very troubling, and it's what's taking place in the U.S. And it's very. I know I'm here in China saying it's very troubling. You guys are going through it, living it. I know that for the first few weeks, we were terrified here. So, with the U.S. going through month 4, month 5 now, I'm quite sure that it's really putting a strain on everybody's lives.
Yeah, it definitely, from an economical standpoint, there are a lot of people that are unemployed still. A lot of people have had to close their business. There are still people that one minute they're calling it a hoax, the next minute they just don't want to wear masks, the next minute some of those same people end up being in the death count.
Right.
So it's one of those situations where we have to take this seriously. Like, we still got people, the protesting, that's one thing. Everybody was responsible wearing masks when the whole George Floyd stuff went down. Everybody's responsible in that regard. But we've had instances in the U.S. where heads were still having big gatherings with no mask on. Like, how can you be that, and I'm sitting here looking at it like, how can you be that irresponsible knowing that we're in the middle of a pandemic? So that's what's pretty much going on our end.
Yeah, it's such a shame because from what I understand, it's becoming political in the U.S. And I'm not going to go down that road, but it's a shame. Now, one thing I was able to do, I was really able to do much more coaching during this time. And I'll tell you why. In China, when it hit, my first priority was taking care of my family. So I had to let a few clients know that for the next couple of weeks, I need to focus on my family. The clients who were here in China, they agreed. Same thing. They wanted to focus on their family. It was not the time to coach. Over time, though, I found more of my ex-colleagues and clients here reaching back to me, and from the U.S. reaching out to me and saying, Colin, you know what? We've been on this lockdown for a few weeks, and we don't know how to handle this. Our family is scared. Some of our family members must still go out and work. They're scared they're going to bring something back into the household. The houses, went from being where you ate dinner and slept and watched TV to being the gym, the spa, the office, the recreation center. It went to being everything. A lot of families really had trouble adjusting. A lot of kids no longer had proms. A lot of families had trouble adjusting. A lot of spouses could not really get along. So I get phone calls saying, Colin, how do we deal with these things? So I started doing what I call COVID coaching, helping people really deal with what they're going through. But I'll tell you what, Everett, I learned very quickly, there's no such thing as COVID coaching. I'll give you an example. If, there's something here in China we call the COVID divorce. Once they let the restrictions down, so many couples filed for divorce. And what we found was a lot of times relationships got worse during the COVID time because people don't know how to communicate that well with each other. But it wasn't COVID that caused the issue. If you have an issue during COVID in your relationships, odds are it was there before. If you're having trouble really focusing on work and being productive, odds are it was there before COVID. So we went from saying this is about COVID to this is about life. It goes right back to being a life coach. All these things, COVID is a chapter in your life. If your life was a little bit off before, all COVID did was put a magnifying glass on that and brought that issue to the surface. So for a lot of people, this is the exact time for them to get coaching because those little things that were issues are now big ones. And as you know, this is the perfect time to address those things because now you have more time at home when you can really take action. And I tell folks, when you look back on COVID, what would you have gained? What was your purpose during this time? What is your plan? You should be learning something, doing something, not just what I call chilling. I know nobody's chilling, right? What's the perfect time for people to really improve their lives and go from where they are to where they want to be?
That's awesome. That is a awesome view on the lesson that we can learn from this pandemic. That is a very, very awesome view because I think so many times when we was out and about and going to different places, sometimes I feel like with couples and even with certain people, it's like sometimes we ignore certain things that need to be taken care of at home and we don't take care of it when we just so focused on the go and just out and about that when this pandemic hits and we're finally, confined in our home for safety reasons, that now you have no choice almost but to confront some of the flaws that you have kind of been running away from, making an excuse for being busy at work or whatnot. And I think you just hit the nail on the head in terms of lessons learned and stuff of that nature, because I'll be honest with you. I felt like a lot of people, or a decent amount of people, I ain't going to say a lot of people because being subjective here. I feel like there were some people out there that kind of were running on a selfish, self-absorbed train. I'll just be honest. I think that was part of a problem. And I think with this pandemic and the different things that have been taking place, I think it's one of those situations where it forced people to take a step back and reevaluate where they are, where they want to be, and how to get there at a more healthy rate. And I'm not talking about healthy physically. I'm talking about also mentally. I'm talking about spiritually too. So it's very important that we take that time when we're going through this pandemic, and some of us are not out of the woodworks yet. I know here that some of the rules have been relaxed to a point in where I'm at, but we still have to be safe and take certain procedures. With that being said, man, you hit the nail right on the head, and I want to thank you for coming in and being a part of this, man. I really do appreciate your input.
Yeah, Everett, think about this. If you can succeed and make it through the coronavirus and come out of this in a better position than you were before, you can do anything. A lot of people are impacted. You mentioned a moment ago, this is a good time for people to reflect. It's a shame that we need a negative thing to make us reflect. One of the benefits of coaching, again, is helping people to do the reflection while things are going great. Again, we don't have to wait until things are bad to say, man, this is really making me think about what I really should be doing. But it doesn't matter. If you're reflecting now, you have to do two things. Reflection is great, but reflection with no action is called daydreaming, right? You really need to take action. And that's the most important thing right now. People who listen to this, again, fast forward 6 months. In 6 months, what do you want to achieve? Start achieving it. We're all what I call COVID veterans right now. We've all survived COVID for at least 4 or 5 months now. So we know how to survive it. We know what to do. Now that you have that, okay, you know how to survive it. Now put your focus on something else. And that is, what can you do right now to improve your life? Because again, odds are, if you improve your life, the lives of your family and friends also improve. So what can you do right now to start that process?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Colin, first off, I want to thank you for coming on Audio Airstrike. I appreciate the words. I appreciate the jewels that you've dropped. I'm going to let you have the floor, and I'm going to let you plug any of your contact info, social media, where people can find you at and give more information. And if anybody is interested in being a client for your life coaching, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Everett. So folks can go to my website, oligye.com. That's oligye.com. And from there, they can find the way to reaching out to me, learning more about my coaching, my training, my motivational speaking, all of that. Everything is there. I am on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. But again, if you start with my website, oligye.com, you can navigate to more information. And I want to add one more thing. Cool. I asked you earlier to read that statement about my spare time. I like to do some running and whatnot. And it's my birthday tomorrow. And about 10 years ago, I started a birthday tradition. And I'm bringing it to the air here because I want to say it out loud. And I want to share with people that sometimes if you find things that are difficult to do and you do it, it makes you unstoppable. So every year I run my age in miles. So I'm 47 this year. So I'll be doing 47 miles over a 24-hour period starting tonight into tomorrow. And this is one of the most painful things I've ever done in my life. And I do it every year. And the reason I do it is because it really helps me build up that unreasonable confidence that I can do things. Because again, I know it's going to be mentally draining and physically draining. But if you know this, going into it, there's something that's going to really beat you down and hurt you, but you're able to, one, still start it, and you're able to finish it it can only make you stronger. So to your listeners, to your viewers, I want to say, find something in life that's really intimidating and do it. And you'll see how your intimidation level goes down. You start being a much more confident person and knowing that things you start, you will finish. Thank you, Everett.
That is awesome. And that's a good way to end this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, if you ain't inspired by this man at his age, I don't know what to tell you. And the thing about it is he's humble, he's willing to listen, but he's also willing to point people in a very, very, very positive direction. I am thankful to have you on here, and definitely would like to have you on again.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, no problem. You're always welcome back. With that being said, this has been another edition of Audio Airstrike. For those of you who listened to this episode, we thank you. And for those of you who watched this episode, we thank you as well. We thank you for continuing to listen week after week. And we will be back next week. Until next time, everybody, y'all take care. Have a good one.